Nestled within one of the important hyperspace lanes, the famous Karelian Run, were many planets which served as bases for each of the rims of the galaxy. One of these was a unique planet which shone like a crystal in space, highlighted by the green glowing roads that made up its cities below. Soon more lights will begin to shine above and below the planet in the form of lethal explosions, as the Separatists set their sights on this vital planet. Welcome to the Wizards and Warriors channel. We're glad to have you with us on our next journey into the Star Wars saga. As is our custom, we invite you to get comfortable, grab a drink, and bring your brass knuckles in case some clankers show up as we begin our recounting of the Battle of Christophsis. In the aftermath of Geonosis, the fragile state of the galaxy finally shattered. Though the Republic had won the war's first battle, they were in a worse position following the start of hostilities, as hidden Separatist droid armies were unleashed from their bases, forcing the Republic to scramble to deploy their new army to these fronts. In the early stage of the war, the primary strategic goal for both sides was to secure crucial hyperspace lanes. Hyperspace lanes were established routes used by ships to traverse the galaxy with relative safety, as one of the primary concerns when it came to traveling with light speed was crashing into celestial bodies such as asteroid fields and planets. These discovered lanes were of vital use to transport supplies between the rims, and the planet systems on these routes benefited greatly as depots from which ships could resupply, as well as a place to distribute their goods in their respective rim. Invading these planets was not as simple as deploying your army on the surface and waiting it out, as these were entire planets that not only needed to be conquered but garrisoned as well, which required time in which either side could call upon reinforcements. To this end, each side would develop their strategies to blockade planets and deploy ships which could help them do so. The Separatists, though consisting of many systems, had lower populations than their adversaries. To make up for this disparity, they utilized battle droids, which they could produce and deploy en masse. On top of their droid army, the Separatists also possessed highly mobile heavy equipment. They also had an impressive officer corps that they took pride in, as they were willing veterans who fought in the Outer Rim and were defending their homes. Moreover, unlike the Republic, they were not using humanoid slaves, which they saw the clones to be, as cannon fodder. This made their army act highly aggressive, and they were usually the ones to start campaigns and invasions. Their capital ships were the famous Lucrehulk-class battleship, which was capable of holding entire armies. In addition to this were the Munificent-class and Providence-class warships, highly capable offensive ships that sported some of the heaviest turbocannons in the galaxy. The Republic, in contrast, was a primarily defensive army. Even though they had to initiate their fair share of invasions, their offensive attacks were meticulous and careful. This can be seen with their heavy equipment, such as the AT-TE, which was capable of taking down their opposition before the lighter vehicles and LA-AT dropships would swoop in to exploit the gaps. Their initial ships, the Acclamator class, which they used at Geonosis, were still in use, but they were well aware that these posed little threat to their formidable Separatist opponents. Thus these ships were moved to a support role, in favour of the Venator-class Star Destroyer. The Venators held formidable guns, as well as a large number of starfighters, which, unlike the Separatists, who used droid-controlled ships, used able-bodied pilots, giving the Republic an edge as their fighters could maneuver more creatively. The initial stages of the conflict were smaller in scale than what they would later become, so the majority of the early fighting was done via skirmishing above planets, with the winner being able to deploy below. Those planets they couldn't afford to spend manpower on were instead fought over in proxy wars, with each side funding rebels on said worlds, and it is for this reason that the war would be called the Clone Wars rather than the Clone War, as a number of smaller conflicts occurred at the same time, either through outside interference or already existing internal issues that now escalated as the authority of the Republic was not present. Once the front lines had become established, the war started in earnest. The Separatists had come to wrest control of parts of the hyperspace lanes, but were held in deadlock in a good number of the systems. In one of the first major operations of the war, they set their sights on the planet Christophsis. Christophsis was a crystalline planet that not only served as a good base, but was also valuable in its resources. Several months after the war had begun, the second major battle was to begin. The invasion was to be under the command of General Worm Loathsome. Though we do not know of his deeds, He was considered a legend within the Inner Rim. Accompanying him would be the equally famous Admiral Trench, who had a decorated naval career. Although we do not know the exact numbers of their ground forces, we know Trench commanded one Providence-class dreadnought, his flagship the Invincible, around 25 Munificent-class star frigates, and at least 6 Lucrehulk-class battleships. The elites of Christophsis had tried to maintain a position of neutrality prior to this, but with the Separatist fleet arriving in the system, they fled. The citizens of the planet, however, were not going to accept this change in leadership, and instead decided to band together with the Republic garrison force and fight. The Separatists landed on the planet's surface uncontested, and subsequently made their way towards the cities, where fighting broke out. The resistance tried all it could, but couldn't stand against the Separatist force, and was forced to fall back. Once it became apparent that they couldn't win on their own, they sent a request to the Republic for aid. The Republic was tied up in different sectors still, and so sent a relief mission led by Senator Bail Organa in advance of their mustering force. He landed on the planet and took command of the defense, but they were still being pushed back until they were confined into the eastern exurbs. However, Organa had done more than enough, and at this time the Republic finally arrived. The vanguard of the Republic fleet arrived under the now Jedi Knight and General Anakin Skywalker, who had just arrived from his mission to Kudo 3, where he helped the natives liberate the planet. His force consisted of 3 Venator-class star destroyers under Admiral Wolf Yularen, including his flagship, the Resolute, and several Pelter-class frigates, which were carrying the supplies Organa desperately needed. Upon arrival, he found the planet blockaded by Admiral Trench. General Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was commanding the main force, had sent Skywalker ahead, but informed him not to engage the enemy. Nevertheless, Skywalker tried to force his way through first, with a general assault. He then attempted to run the blockade, but his frigates began taking fire as Trench pressed his command ship forward and focused upon them. Kenobi soon arrived aboard the Negotiator and suggested Skywalker break off the assault, which he did, covering the frigate's retreat before withdrawing his Venators to rendezvous with Kenobi behind Lilis, the Christophsis moon. While the blockade around the planet was formidable, it was not impregnable. However, Kenobi knew that if they tried to break it, Organa wouldn't last. To this end, he revealed to Skywalker his secret weapon, the IPV-2C stealth corvette. This was an experimental vessel that was equipped with a cloaking device that rendered the ship invisible. Giving the ship to Skywalker's command, he was to bypass the blockade and deliver the supplies. After they were stocked, Skywalker set out towards Christophsis, with Yularen accompanying him. As they were passing through the blockade, they came into the path of a number of droid Hyena starships. The crew was afraid that they'd been detected, but Skywalker kept his calm. The droids passed harmlessly overhead, with their target instead being Organa's base, where they commenced a bombing run. This was a maneuver by Trench, as he had grown tired of the Republic cowards hiding behind the moon, and wanted to put pressure on them to relieve the Senator. This worked, but not the way he had expected, as instead of Kenobi launching an assault, it was Skywalker who decloaked the ship and fired torpedoes upon the Invincible. These torpedoes were stopped as Trench had the shields raised in time, but his torpedoes were also stopped in turn as Skywalker recloaked his ship in time and evaded the laser fire spread Trench deployed. Trench was still confident, as he had dealt with cloaked ships before, and baited Skywalker to attack him via open comms. This attempt at goading was successful, for Skywalker soon decloaked and fired again, leading to Trench locking on to his magnetic signature, which could be used to track him as he cloaked again. Trench then had the shields lowered so he could launch his tracking torpedoes, which followed Skywalker. But unbeknownst to Trench, Skywalker had tricked him instead, as he had learned of Trench's history with fighting cloaked ships, and correctly surmised that it was his magnetic signature he used to track them. With Trench falling for the ploy, Skywalker decloaked the ship, put all power into the thrusters, and made a beeline towards the Invincible. Trench thought he was going to fire again, and ordered the shields raised, but the shield generators had not recharged, and soon Skywalker's ship narrowly passed above the bridge, as Trench realized his enemy's plan, and the Invincible's bow was hit with the torpedoes, rendering the ship inoperable. Skywalker then made way for Organa's refugee camp, as Kenobi capitalized on the disorder in the blockade and launched an immediate attack, which broke through it and allowed him to land troops in Chalidonia, the capital of the planet, where they set up base in the Western District. with the Republic's arrival in full force in the form of Kenobi's 212th Attack Battalion under Marshal Commander Cody and Skywalker's 501st Legion under Captain Rex, Organa was relieved of command, and the Republic was able to expand their control over most of the city. However, all was not lost for the Separatists, for even though the Republic had broken the blockade, the Separatist navy hadn't retreated in the wake of Trench's demise, so supplies to both sides came in regularly. Thus, with Admiral Yularen incapable of driving the Separatists out of the planet's orbit, the battle would be decided on the ground. Another thing the Separatists had was numbers. Though we don't know the exact numbers, the droids did outnumber the clones, as we can infer from the following battle. It is probable that General Loathsome didn't immediately press the Republic, as they had time to set up their base fully within Chaladonia. Most likely, the first assaults were probe attacks towards each street, as the cities of Christophsis were foreign and inaccessible to outsiders. Having found his point of attack, he prepared his assault, and just where the Jedi intended him to attack, as they set up an ambush between two towers, which flanked north and south of the road, with Kenobi in the south and Skywalker in the north. Just as the droids got within range, the column split and marched towards the tower entrances instead. Kenobi sensed something was wrong. His hunch was correct, for soon the south tower was set upon by a large number of battle droids. Upon learning of this, Skywalker leapt into action. He pulled up a dropship to the south tower, and then had his troopers fire their ascension cables towards the opposite tower, and they ziplined over to aid Kenobi's command. Having done so, they were able to retreat to the turbo lift and ascend to the roof, where they boarded the dropship and escaped. Returning to the command base, the Republic commanders wanted to determine how the Separatists knew of their plan. Luckily, a clone had been able to rip the head off a tactical droid before his escape, and this gave Republic military command some of the information it needed. They were able to confirm that the enemy knew of the ambush, confirming that there was a spy in their midst. Rather than waiting to find the culprit, Kenobi decided to sneak behind enemy lines along with Skywalker to hopefully find information of their own, leaving clone commanders Cody and Rex to contain the security breach. Kenobi and Skywalker made it to the Separatist headquarters without hindrance. Even though they had deduced it to be a trap and that the spy had tipped off the enemy, they went ahead anyway, finding the Sith assassin Asajj Ventress waiting for them. A fight broke out, and although neither side could make ground, the two Jedi did determine they were right in that they had been betrayed from within. Moreover, they discovered Ventress had brought more droids to aid Loathsome, and they were preparing to attack. Kenobi and Skywalker quickly broke off the fight and headed for the HQ, which they found aflame. The spy had been apprehended, and it was a clone trooper named Slick. But before he was caught, he managed to destroy several pieces of heavy equipment, as well as the weapons depot, putting them in a poor situation as the Separatists were primed to bear down upon them. At this point, the Separatists had pushed the front line back in the capital and directed their focus at the city centre, which Kenobi had made into the forward command centre. The next morning, Loathsome attacked with a large array of battle droids and 3 Octuptara tridroids. However, this assault was repelled as the Republic's heavy cannons were still operable and wreaked devastation on the tightly packed column. Still, since the sabotage at the main base, the Republic had yet to have a chance to resupply. Admiral Yularen was doing everything to hold the breach they had made within the Separatist blockade, and needed to have the chance to resupply the ground forces adequately. To worsen the situation, the Separatists sent even more ships to Christophsis and forced Yularen into retreat. The Republic ground forces were now on their own, but Admiral Yularen was able to send a distress call to the Jedi Temple, which up until now were unaware of just how dire the situation was. So the plan was to hold the Separatists off until Yularen could arrive in force to reinforce them. Loathsome was aware that the Republic would likely return, and so made preparations for a final assault. The plan hinged upon a large deflector shield generator, which they set up behind the front line. This would generate a hemisphere shield that would slowly grow to eventually encompass where the Republic's heavy cannons were located, and whilst it was expanding, Loathsome's assault force would advance behind the shield, rendering the cannons useless. The clones observed this force to consist of everything Loathsome could muster, with B-1 and B-2 battle droids, AAT medium tanks, tri-droids, and the newly arrived NR-N99 Persuader tanks. The Republic quickly deduced his plan and set their forces in motion. Kenobi was to remain on the front line with Captain Rex to stall the advance, while Skywalker and his newly arrived Padawan Ahsoka Tano were to sneak behind enemy lines and destroy the deflector shield. Skywalker and Tano could sneak directly through the front with the clever use of a box, which the droids passed. Meanwhile, as the Separatists marched into the city center, they were set upon by Kenobi and the clones, who had taken refuge in the numerous towers and attacked once the shield had passed their position. They made Loathsome pay for every block, but without any heavy equipment of their own, they were forced to fall back once the tanks reached them. This kept up until they had reached the forward command center, at which point Kenobi ordered Rex to take the clones and retreat to the guns. Rex did so begrudgingly, leaving Kenobi to delay the enemy. Kenobi held them off until he could no more, at which point he surrendered himself to Loathsome. Loathsome then demanded he surrender all his forces, to which Kenobi agreed, and invited him to discuss the terms. In the ensuing parley, Kenobi played on Loathsome's ego with flattery. This worked, but this didn't end the advance. However, it did deprive the Separatists of their commander, which was Kenobi's intention. This bought Skywalker and Tano the time they needed to reach and destroy the deflector shield. Just in time, for Loathsome had nearly executed Kenobi, who infuriatingly went into every detail behind the surrendered terms. With the shield down, Rex ordered the cannons to resume fire, effectively ending the assault. More importantly, Yularen had returned, along with reinforcements from Wurz's fleet and Grandmaster Yoda. They were able to breach the blockade, and their fleet drove off the Separatist ships, forcing Loathsome, whom Kenobi had subsequently captured, to surrender, placing Christophsis under Republic control, and ending the first major battle of the war. The Battle of Christophsis served as the Republic's first morale boost since the start of the war, and showed that Jedi and clones could accomplish extraordinary feats with each other, and that the CIS's innumerable battle droids were not invincible. It also served as a wake-up call to the Separatists, who until now believed the Republic would simply cave under their onslaught of numbers and strategic commanders. Subsequently, the Separatists began looking for new ways to overcome their deficiencies. Ultimately, the battle served as a more sobering reminder that this was war, and from here on out, destruction and chaos would be the order of the day, because there were some who wanted exactly that. Our retelling of the Clone Wars will continue in the next episode of this series. To ensure you don't miss it, subscribe and press the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.